The courtroom froze. A smirk met an icy glare. He thought money bought silence, but justice was about to serve a lesson in public humiliation that would echo far beyond these walls. The air in the courtroom hung heavy, thick with a tension that gripped every single person present, except for one. There he sat, barely out of childhood, yet radiating an arrogance that could curdle milk. Ethan Thorne. A name whispered with a mixture of envy and disdain in the city's elite circles. To him, this wasn't a court of law. It was an unfortunate, temporary inconvenience. A minor blip in his otherwise meticulously curated life of privilege. He was a teenager, yes, but one who truly believed he was untouchable. And in his world, he always had been. His father, a titan of industry, a man whose wealth could buy silence, influence, and perhaps even blind justice, had ensured that. Every scrape, every reckless decision, every minor brush with consequences had been swiftly swept under the rug by an army of high-priced lawyers and public relations experts. Ethan had grown up breathing the rarefied air of absolute impunity. He knew no other way. His casual smirk, the way his eyes lazily scanned the room as if assessing the value of its contents, spoke volumes. He thought he was above it all. He thought he was above her. And then, his gaze landed on Judge Judy. The moment was palpable. The courtroom, already silent, seemed to hold its breath. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen it all, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual show of a bewildered kid facing a stern judge. This was a collision of worlds. Old money versus old school justice. Entitlement versus accountability. And in that moment, everyone knew disaster was coming, but nobody knew for whom. Ethan, oblivious in his bubble of privilege, barely registered the cold steel in Judge Judy's eyes. He saw only an old woman, perhaps a relic of a bygone era, easily swayed by the right connections or, more reliably, the right amount of cash. He had no idea he was staring into the very embodiment of the adult court system he had so blithely underestimated. He had no idea this court didn't care about his family name. He had no idea that for the first time in his life, his money meant absolutely nothing. And that was his biggest mistake. The case itself was a mess. A hit and run. Not just any hit and run, but one where the victim, an elderly street vendor, was left for dead on the asphalt, their meager livelihood scattered across the grimy pavement. Ethan, driving his father's custom-made luxury sports car, had simply driven away. His explanation? He didn't feel anything. He was running late. His lawyer, a slick, expensive suit who smelled of fear and desperation, had tried to keep it in juvenile court, where Ethan had a history of making problems disappear. But this time, the victim's injuries were too severe. The public outcry, too loud. The DA had pushed hard. And now, here he was. Adult court. The big leagues. But Ethan didn't get it. Not yet. He leaned back in his chair, almost slouching, an air of bored indifference his default setting. He cracked his knuckles, a loud, jarring sound in the hushed room. A ripple of whispers, a collective gasp from the public gallery.
How dare he?
How could he be so disrespectful? Judge Judy, however, didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed, a predator sizing up its prey.
No anger.
Just a terrifying, analytical calm. This wasn't about shouting. This was about something far more dangerous. Mr. Thorne, Judge Judy's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel, quiet but razor-sharp. Not a question, not an accusation, but a statement of simple fact. Her tone was devoid of emotion, a blank slate that somehow conveyed more menace than any raised voice could. Ethan straightened slightly, a fleeting moment of surprise at the direct address. He hadn't expected her to speak so soon. He cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture of superiority. Your Honor. His voice was smooth, practiced, devoid of any genuine respect. It was the voice of someone who had never had to genuinely respect anyone. You understand why you are here, Mr. Thorne, she continued, her eyes never leaving his. It wasn't a genuine inquiry into his understanding.
It was a test.
A probe. He scoffed, a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, but loud enough in the stillness. I understand there's been an unfortunate misunderstanding, Your Honor. He glanced at his lawyer, a fleeting, almost arrogant nod of reassurance. His lawyer visibly recoiled, a silent plea for him to just stop talking. But Ethan couldn't. His ego wouldn't allow it. The courtroom stirred. Disbelief. Anger. The victim's family, huddled together, squeezed their hands tighter. An unfortunate misunderstanding? A man was in critical condition, fighting for his life, and this kid called it a misunderstanding? The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Judge Judy, however, remained impassive. She let the silence stretch, allowing Ethan's words to hang in the air, festering. This was the Judge Judy silence. A weapon. A psychological tool designed to amplify the weight of every ill-chosen word, every act of disrespect. The air crackled. The silence felt dangerous. Misunderstanding, she finally echoed, her voice still quiet, almost thoughtful. Is that what you call leaving a man bleeding on the street, Mr. Thorne? A man who was simply trying to earn an honest living? Is that your definition of a misunderstanding? Ethan's smirk faltered, just for a millisecond. He hadn't expected the directness. He had expected the usual legal gymnastics, the polite fictions. He tried to recover. Your Honor, I was startled. It was dark. An accident. He started to fidget, his gaze darting away from hers, searching for an escape route. His rehearsed answers felt suddenly flimsy. An accident, Judge Judy repeated, her voice still calm, but now with an edge that could strip paint. And what about the part where you drove away? Was that an accident too? Did your car accidentally decide to speed off, leaving behind a crumpled body and a trail of debris? Her questions weren't questions. They were accusations, perfectly formed and devastating. I panicked, Your Honor, Ethan stammered, a slight flush creeping up his neck. The lies were coming out faster now, less polished. I'm just a kid. I didn't know what to do.
A kid.
The words hung in the air. A kid who drove a car worth more than most people's homes. A kid who knew how to cover his tracks, how to call his father's lawyers, how to disappear into the night. The hypocrisy was sickening. A low murmur swept through the public gallery, a mix of disgust and outrage. Judge Judy raised a hand, and the murmurs died instantly. The room fell silent once more, a heavy, suffocating silence. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. A kid, Mr. Thorne? Is that what you told the officers when they found your car, hidden away in your private garage, carefully cleaned to remove any evidence? Shockwaves went through the courtroom. Hidden reveal. The public gallery gasped. The victim's family members leaned forward, their faces etched with a mix of horror and dawning hope. Ethan's lawyer paled, gripping the edge of the table. This wasn't in the initial filings. This was new. This was bad. Ethan's face went white. The blood drained from his features, leaving him looking suddenly young, vulnerable, terrified. His untouchable mask cracked wide open, revealing the panicked teenager beneath. I don't know what you're talking about, Your Honor, he mumbled, his voice suddenly small, devoid of its earlier bravado. Oh, I think you do, Judge Judy retorted, her voice dropping to an even lower, more dangerous register. Because we have the surveillance footage, Mr. Thorne. Footage from your own property. Showing you, personally, taking a pressure washer to that expensive vehicle hours after the incident. Trying to scrub away the evidence of your accident. Does that sound like panic, Mr. Thorne? Or does that sound like a calculated attempt to obstruct justice? The silence that followed was absolute. People in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, some covering their mouths in shock. Others stared, their eyes wide, as the gravity of the revelation sank in. This wasn't just a hit and run. This was active concealment, a deliberate attempt to escape accountability, the arrogance of believing he could get away with it. Ethan looked like a deer caught in headlights. His eyes darted to his lawyer, a frantic, desperate appeal for help. But his lawyer could only stare blankly, his elaborate legal strategies crumbling around him. Judge Judy had just delivered a verbal uppercut, and the boy who thought he was untouchable was reeling. "This is an adult court, Mr. Thorne," Judge Judy continued, her voice now ringing with undeniable authority. "And in an adult court, we don't treat deliberate concealment of evidence as a misunderstanding or a panic attack. We call it a felony. We call it a conscious choice. A choice you made, despite your age, to prioritize your own comfort over the life of another human being." Emotional humiliation. His facade was not merely cracking, it was shattering. The boy who had never faced a genuine consequence was now facing the full, terrifying force of a justice system that refused to be bought or intimidated. The sense of powerlessness washed over him, visible in the slight tremor of his hands, the sudden clenching of his jaw. He tried to recover, to lash out. A cornered animal. "My father will hear about this, Your Honor," he blurted, the words tumbling out, desperate and pathetic. The ultimate spoiled rich kid threat. "He has connections. You can't just accuse me like this." The courtroom collectively gasped. A whisper of, "Oh my God," swept through the rows. Even the bailiff froze. This was a direct challenge. A full frontal assault on the judge's authority. The room held its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. But Judge Judy didn't raise her voice.
She didn't shout.
Instead, she leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible arch in one eyebrow. Her gaze became even colder, if that were possible. "Your father," she mused, the name dripping with disdain. "Is your father a party to this case, Mr. Thorne? Is your father the one accused of leaving an elderly man for dead? Is your father the one who tried to scrub the blood from his car?" Her voice was low, cutting, each word a precise jab. "No, Your Honor," his lawyer finally managed to interject, his voice strained, desperate to regain some semblance of control. "Mr. Thorne is simply distraught." Judge Judy cut him off with a flick of her hand. "Distraught? Or entitled? Let me make one thing crystal clear to you, Mr. Thorne. This courtroom doesn't care about your father's connections. It doesn't care about his money. It cares about justice.
And right now,
all I see is a young man who believes his wealth somehow places him above the law. A belief I intend to disabuse you of, right here, right now." Public humiliation. The raw, unfiltered anger of the crowd was almost a physical presence. The sense of poetic justice beginning to unfold was intoxicating. The boy who thought money could buy anything was learning its limits in the most public, soul-crushing way possible. His face was a mask of furious, impotent rage, mingled with a terror he couldn't hide. "You confused wealth with character, Mr. Thorne," Judge Judy stated, her voice now a definitive pronouncement. "And you confused influence with impunity. You thought you were untouchable. You thought this was juvenile court, where a slap on the wrist and a stern talking to would suffice. But you are wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in, each syllable a hammer blow. "This is adult court. And in adult court, we hold adults accountable for adult crimes. And you, Mr. Thorne, are about to learn what that truly means." Micro cliffhanger. The courtroom braced itself. This was more than a legal proceeding now. This was a moral reckoning. A public dismantling of a carefully constructed illusion. He had no idea the full extent of the humiliation that was coming. The next few hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare orchestrated by Judge Judy. She didn't just prosecute the crime, she prosecuted the mindset behind the crime. Every question she posed to Ethan wasn't merely seeking information, it was designed to expose his deeply ingrained entitlement, his lack of empathy, and his staggering ignorance of consequences. She chipped away at his composure, piece by agonizing piece. "Tell me, Mr. Thorne," she asked, her gaze unwavering as she reviewed a document. "When you drove past Mr. Ramirez, lying on the pavement, did you consider what his life might be like? Did you consider that he might have a family? That he might be the sole provider?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He had been coached by his lawyer to show some remorse, but it felt utterly foreign to him. Your Honor, I was in shock. I didn't see clearly. His voice was still wavering.
Shock?
Judge Judy shot back, a dangerous glint in her eye. Or indifference. You were in such shock that you could accurately navigate your vehicle home, park it, and then meticulously clean it? That sounds like a very selective kind of shock to me, Mr. Thorne. One that conveniently allowed you to prioritize your own skin over another man's life. Audience murmurs swelled. Someone in the gallery openly scoffed. The sheer audacity of his defense was infuriating. The victim's daughter began to quietly weep, her head buried in her mother's shoulder. Do you know the cost of Mr. Ramirez's medical care, Mr. Thorne? Judge Judy continued, her voice gaining momentum, a relentless wave crashing against his fragile defenses. Do you know that his family is struggling to keep their home? Do you know that the meager savings he had were wiped out trying to save his life? Ethan looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sure my family would be willing to compensate them, Your Honor. The dreaded money solves everything card pulled out in desperation. A new wave of anger surged through the courtroom. Judge Judy slammed her hand, not hard, but with a sharp, resonant thud, onto the bench. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Compensate them? Her voice, still calm, somehow carried more force than a shout. Mr. Thorne, you are not here to compensate a man for nearly taking his life. You are here to face justice for a criminal act. This isn't a business transaction. This isn't a negotiation. This is accountability.
Verbal destruction.
His eyes flickered up, wide with a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated hatred. He despised being told his money held no power. It was an alien concept. His face hardened, a mask of resentment quickly replacing the fleeting fear. I believe, he began, trying to regain some semblance of control, his voice now laced with a simmering defiance, that this entire situation is being blown out of proportion. My lawyer has informed me that the victim was not in a well-lit area. Perhaps he was partially at fault. The words hung in the air, a vile accusation.
The courtroom gasped.
The victim's daughter cried out, a raw, anguished sound. Ethan had just blamed the victim. He had just revealed the true, ugly depths of his character. He thought he could fight back, twist the narrative. But Judge Judy was ready. Her eyes flashed cold and dangerous. Partially at fault, Mr. Thorne? For being hit by a reckless driver who then fled the scene? Is that your expert legal opinion? She scoffed, a sound of utter contempt. Let's talk about expertise then. Let's talk about the toxicology report. The one that clearly shows you had a blood alcohol content well over the legal limit, Mr. Thorne, despite your age. A new reveal. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, angry exclamations. Alcohol. He wasn't just reckless, he was impaired. The lies piled up, each one bigger, more damning than the last. Ethan froze, his mouth agape, the color draining from his face once more. The arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by absolute, naked terror. You not only hit Mr. Ramirez, Judge Judy pressed on, relentless. You were drunk. You then chose to flee. You then chose to conceal evidence. And now you have the audacity, the unmitigated gall, to blame your victim. Is that the kind of untouchable behavior your father taught you, Mr. Thorne? He flinched as if struck. The mention of his father, not as a source of protection but as an implication of moral failure, was a devastating blow. His entire identity, built on his family's prestige, was crumbling. He was shaking now, visibly, uncontrollably. His finely tailored suit suddenly seemed too big for his trembling frame. I deny consuming any alcohol, Your Honor, he stammered, a desperate, pathetic attempt at a comeback. A last-ditch lie, flimsy and transparent. Judge Judy merely looked at him, a long, piercing stare that spoke volumes. The silence returned, heavy with judgment. Do you deny the toxicology report, Mr. Thorne? Are you calling the forensic scientists liars? Are you calling the evidence a fabrication? Her voice was a slow, deliberate death knell for his defense. "No, Your Honor," but he trailed off, his words catching in his throat. There was no but. There was no escape. "There are no buts in adult court, Mr. Thorne," Judge Judy interjected, her voice final. "There are only facts. And the facts paint a very clear picture of a young man who believes the rules don't apply to him, who believes his status grants him immunity, who believes he can destroy another person's life and simply walk away." The humiliation was complete. His eyes, once arrogant and dismissive, were now filled with raw, childish tears of frustration and despair. He looked around the courtroom, no longer seeking admiration or even fear, but perhaps a shred of pity.
He found none.
Only judgment. Only righteous indignation. "You spoke of misunderstandings, Mr. Thorne," Judge Judy continued, her voice now a cold, unwavering stream of justice. "Let me assure you, there is no misunderstanding here. You understood exactly what you were doing. You understood the risks. And you understood the choice to flee. What you failed to understand, Mr. Thorne, is that the world outside your gilded cage operates on principles you clearly never learned. Accountability, responsibility, and the sacred value of every human life." She paused, allowing her words to sink into the stunned silence of the courtroom, into the shattered ego of the boy before her. "This adult court does not cater to your privilege. It does not bend to your father's influence. It exists to serve justice. And today, Mr. Thorne, justice will be served, not with a misunderstanding, but with the full, unvarnished truth." The room seemed to collectively exhale. The moral victory was palpable. He had come in an untouchable prince, and he was leaving as a publicly humiliated, exposed criminal. The transformation was complete. His belief system, his entire understanding of his place in the world, had been systematically dismantled before his very eyes. And the worst part? He had done most of the work himself, digging his own grave with every arrogant word, every dismissive gesture. Judge Judy then laid out the preliminary findings. The charges were severe: felony hit-and-run, driving under the influence, obstruction of justice. The words, once meaningless legal jargon, now hit Ethan like physical blows. He wasn't just facing fines, he was facing serious prison time. Adult prison time. The kind of time that would strip away his privilege, his comfort, his carefully constructed life. The kind of time that would change everything. His lawyer, defeated, could only place a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of grim solidarity rather than hope. Ethan stared blankly ahead, his face utterly devoid of expression. The smirk was gone, replaced by a vacant stare. The swagger had evaporated. He was just a boy now, a terrified boy, staring down a future he had never even conceived of. A future where his money was worthless, where his name carried only shame. The public gallery erupted in a flurry of whispers and murmurs as Judge Judy concluded the preliminary hearing, setting a firm date for the full trial. The message was clear. No one, no matter how rich, no matter how connected, was above the law. Not in her courtroom, not in adult court. As Ethan Thorne was led away, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped, he looked like a completely different person than the arrogant youth who had swaggered in hours earlier. The untouchable myth had been utterly, brutally shattered. And the silence he left behind was not one of submission, but of profound, terrifying realization. He had thought he was a god in his own universe. He had no idea he was just another mortal, finally facing the consequences of his actions. And the world watched, captivated by the absolute, crushing justice delivered by a judge who truly understood what it meant to hold power, and how to wield it. This was the moment his privileged life collapsed, and the world had front-row seats to his spectacular fall.